Joining me is Dred Scott. He is the artist who had the controversial exhibit at the Art Institute here in Chicago. He had the flag on the floor where people had to step on the flag to make comments in the book. And you wanted to say what?
What I want to say straight up is, first of all, the people that are up here saying that they're not about censorship, they are. They're about oppression, and it's part of the clampdown, which is why this flag law and amendment are coming up, encouraging spending $25 to encourage people to beat up flag burners is about oppression. And this U.S. flag is hated throughout the world. The people in this audience who hate it, there are people in the housing project of Chicago who hate it. People have died because of what this flag has done.
How about the oppression of Mao Zedong, whose face is on your chest?
Okay, let's talk about Mao Zedong.
Yeah, let's talk about
Mao Zedong was talking about liberating.
Not talking about Mao Zedong.
Okay,
For my next guest, James David Cain, people who burn the United States flag get him very angry, he says. So this Louisiana state lawmaker introduced a bill in the legislature imposing only a $25 fine on anybody who beats up a flag burner.
My question, though, is in you saying that you align yourself with the oppressed people of the world, there seemed to be a preponderance of American flags in both Hungary and Poland. Are you willing to say that those are not oppressed people in both of those countries?
Oh, definitely. See, I don't see the Soviet Union as any kind of model, nor China today as any kind of model of socialism in the world today. And I think the people in the Soviet Union need to make revolution against their rulers, and we need to do it here. You know, it's striking, to me, the hypocrisy of George Bush going to Poland and declaring his sympathy and his solidarity with Solidarity, the independent trade union there, and yet you come back to this country and there's 45,000 miners east of the Mississippi right now, coal miners who are involved in a wildcat strike against the Pittston Coal Company. And this strike is getting very ugly and very violent, and Bush is directly behind the efforts to send in the National Guard very soon. State troopers are being used against these coal miners. Soldier of fortune type, mercenary types have been hired by the private security companies for the coal companies. So when Bush talks about his sympathy for the Solidarity union workers or for the coal miners that are on strike in the Soviet Union, I think there's enormous hypocrisy. And I think both Gorbachev and Bush are trying to make inroads into Europe and try to soften up people in the opposite side's bloc as they position themselves in the world for whatever crises are going to lie ahead in the future. I think both blocs are sick and dying empires, and as I said before, the people in China need to make revolution, the people in the Soviet Union, Afghanistan, and Ethiopia need to make revolution against the Soviets, and people in this country need revolution.
What is it about the flag being misused in your interpretation was so upsetting to you that you introduced this bill?
Well, first you got to realize the flag is a special symbol for all Americans. You know, we don't run the Constitution up a flagpole. We run the flag. We pledge allegiance to the flag. So it's something very special, and there's not a one of us in this audience or in the nation hadn't lost an ancestor defending the American flag. So it's very special to a lot of us, and there's a right to protest, but there's limits. People shouldn't burn the American flag while they're protesting.
Well, basically, I think the significance of it is it's a very highly charged political statement. I think if it wasn't so powerful and unique in its communicatability and the effect of it, I don't think the government would be making such a fierce attempt to punish flag burning. And I think, once again, the thing that people have to see is that this atmosphere of compulsory patriotism and mandatory Pledge of Allegiance in the schools and forcing people to respect the flag or to shut up is something that has been going on for a number of years in this country. You know, if people don't have amnesia, they can recall that Bush was working for mandatory Pledge of Allegiance before this issue ever came up.
Be sure to catch Darlene in these cities on her upcoming tour. Laramie, Dallas, Little Rock, Amarillo, Topeka, Rapid City, Des Moines, Duluth, and Paducah.
Let's take it back, y'all. I look forward to taking back America with you. Remember, folks, it is not too late to give this great country of ours a fresh coat of white paint. And you heard that from me, Darlene McBride. Bye-bye now.
I think that they see their empire is racked with crisis, and they're facing revolutionary movements in many parts of the world. And they also know that they're bringing down a whole lot of oppression and a clamp down on different sections of the people in this country. Right now, the inner cities of this country are looking really ugly. They're looking like Beirut, most of them. And you have millions of black people who are coming under attack with this so-called war on drugs, which I think is a war on the people. Yesterday, you had congressmen coming out and calling for war bonds, similar to what was issued in World War II for the war on drugs. I mean, this represents a real escalation in just the whole climate that they're trying to create for raids and going in and clamping down or mass arrest of people. And I think we have to see that this is a war on the people. They know people's conditions of life are getting very desperate and getting back to the wall, and they also know that people are going to rebel even more. And they're positioning themselves, and at the same time, they're trying to force the flag on people. That's what's happening here.
Washington, D.C., go ahead.
Hi, I have two short questions for Mr. Johnson. The first is, do you have a job? And the second is, you've got the word revolutionary in your organization's title. Your emblem's got a guy with an AK-47 in the air. You call yourself a communist, and you've said on this program that you're not an American. I'd like to know if you support the violent overthrow of the United States government.
Thanks for the call.
Okay, the first question, I don't even think we need to deal with the do you have a job stuff. I think it's silly, you know. I mean, this is an issue affecting millions of people. I guess what I should say my job is we got to deal with is I'm a full-time revolutionary, and this has been a full-time battle fighting this case and now this constitutional amendment. I think that with regards to the second question about my membership in the Revolutionary Communist Youth Brigade, that's exactly where I'm coming from. We think it is going to come down to a revolutionary war in this country between two sections of the people. We think that this whole system is based on exploitation and oppression, not just the people here, but people throughout the world. The people that I am speaking for and representing here today are the people on the very bottom of this society for whom the American dream is a nightmare. And that's who we're preparing to, in these dangerous times ahead, to bring about a whole different society and a whole different future through revolution.
Well, there is a limit. You got to first realize why, for instance, I introduced the bill in the legislature in Louisiana in the first place.
And that is?
Because I wanted to send a message to the Supreme Court and to our Congress, who's keeping us from voting on an amendment to the Constitution on the flag. I think the flag is one thing that deserves an amendment to the Constitution. When our forefathers, way long time ago, 200 years ago, you know, they wrote the Constitution for that era. We're in a modern America now, 200 years later, and there should be an amendment, and I'm really appalled that Congress won't allow Americans to vote on an amendment.
As a young boy, I understand you sold the Stars and Stripes newspaper in West Germany.
Right.
How did you come from that sort of typical all-American childhood to the position that you hold now?
Well, a lot of my experiences as being an Army brat led to radicalizing and making me more revolutionary in my outlook, I think, because I grew up in a mixed ghetto in Richmond, Indiana. My mother married an Army sergeant that was home on leave. We lived on Army bases in the South, in Alabama. I saw Klan chapters on these Army bases and Confederate flags, and I was saying to myself, what is this? This is supposed to be the Army defending freedom, and this is going on, you know, this kind of ugliness. And then we moved over to West Germany, where my stepfather was restationed, and I went into these mess halls, like you said, just selling the Stars and Stripes newspapers, ironically, and most of the GIs didn't want my paper. This was 1969, and I was only 12 years old, but I got a lot of political education real quick because of the disgust of these GIs. We'd go up into the barracks after formation in the morning, rap about the world and the war, and their hatred and their disgust and their contempt for this government for what it was doing to the Vietnamese people was coming out in a big way. And they were determined in a lot of different ways. GIs were resisting. Initially, mainly the blacks and the Puerto Rican GIs, but even though more the white cats, you know, who were catching on, were trying to find ways to rebel against the war and to resist like being used in it.
Okay, I am a morally concerned artist. I deal not only with homosexuality, I deal with women's rights, I deal with the fact that of homeless rights. In my city, Los Angeles, there are 70,000 homeless people. And this story you just saw is the creation of a character of a homeless alcoholic substance abuser who's at the bottom of the rung. And I think in a way, this whole issue is a smokescreen. I mean, what is more important here is instead of worrying so much about me urinating in a pot on stage with my back primarily to the audience, I think we should be more concerned with finding a pot for these 70,000 people to pee in.
Caller, very quickly, do you favor a constitutional amendment to ban flag burning?
Yes, the Committee for the Protection of the American Flag does favor that.
All right, thank you for the call.
Well, I think it's important to bring out that the states in this country had statutes endorsing slavery at one time in history, endorsing segregation. So if you want to say that just because 48 statutes existed in different states that made it right, I don't see the logic of that. And further, I think that there is very deliberate and very calculated efforts from the highest levels of government to unleash this flag-waving hysteria and virtually flag-worshipping, poor violence by other regimes in other parts of the world come out and make statements that there should be a riot anytime the flag is burned in the street. I think that's very revealing. I think when Patrick Buchanan, who was a former speechwriter for Reagan, says that flag burners should be shot,
when I hesitate, it's not my fault. So take me to Precision Tune. They'll diagnose my problem, tune me up, and guarantee it. Remember, Precision Tune.
For a limited time, get a 34-point computer engine diagnosis and a tune-up with a 12-month, 12,000-mile guarantee at Precision Tune, starting at $39.90. We tune more cars than anybody. At Precision Tune, we do more than fix your car. We guarantee it.
Thanks for the call. Tahoe City, California. Go right ahead.
Yes, I have a comment and then a question. I didn't really believe in the Vietnam War, and I felt that we were wrong in being there. And I spent 4 months of my life in a stockade because I didn't want anything to do with the country that was invading Southeast Asia and shooting rice farmers over there.
Well, first I'd like to say I'm glad you resisted against the Vietnam War, that you saw that it was important to do that. I mean, that's a bit of history that's being airbrushed out, that GIs, basic rank and file GIs, took it upon themselves to find all different kinds of ways to resist the atrocities and the invasions that they were being ordered to carry out. But I think you have to see that in terms of, I don't think people should run away from everything. I think that we should stay here and confront what is unfolding in front of us. And when I said earlier that this was a fascist flag amendment, I think that there's a whole lot of other ugly and fascistic things that are coming down in this country that do have the flavor of what went on in Germany in the 1930s. And I think that rather than run away from it, we should stay here and fight it. I mean, millions of people throughout the world, I think, would rejoice if a revolutionary change took place in this country.
Hang on to the toilet. Okay. Yeah, hang on to the toilet, which by the way, has a picture of Jesus Christ on it, and he urinates into that altar, as you call it. The American people have petitioned their government for a redress of grievances, which is also a right under the First Amendment, and they have said, Mr. Fleck, if you want to traffic in this garbage, then you go ahead and you and the other perverts who want it pay for it. But don't you have us pay for it.
But where in the world would I rather live? Is I refuse to look around the world and see where's the best plantation. Millions of people in continents in Africa and Latin America and Central America are living in horrendous conditions of famine and starvation and death squads because of what this government does all over the world. And if you ask me where I would rather live, I would rather live in the future.
Say what? Yes, sir.
The law and the Constitution of the United States are used by the ruling class for their interests. And the reason that this flag burning decision that has come down from the Supreme Court is such a victory for the people is because it is beating back a major offensive to stifle political dissent in this country. This flag stands for oppression in the eyes of millions of people all over the world, and burning it from Korea to the Philippines to demonstrations here in the United States is a main form of protest. And I am living for the day when we not only have the right to burn this flag, but we can bring down the empire for which it stands.
Yeah. Freedom of speech is one thing. Freedom of action is something else. I guess I guess what this guy is saying, anything goes. What's going to go next? You going to come burn my house down? Is that freedom of action too? Freedom of speech?
No, but let me
where does it end? Where does it end?
Let me make this point.
I don't know what he is, protesting. Maybe it's that he hadn't got a job, but I can answer that. Get a haircut. Get a haircut. Get a haircut.
Tired of games where everybody wins but you? Well, at White Castle, you can win anytime with the White Castle Taste for All Times game. Over $5 million in cash and prizes, including $10,000 grand prize, 7-day Carnival cruises, luggage, stereos, millions of dollars in free food and soft drinks. Just scratch 2 clocks and match to win instantly.
I won.
I won! And if you don't get a match, save your card. Present 3 losing cards and win a White Castle hamburger free. So play 24 hours a day where everyone wins and you can win big at White Castle, the taste for all times.
Well, maybe it would be helpful to point out that when Bush said he was shocked and outraged at the deployment of troops against the Chinese people after the rebellion in Tiananmen Square, perhaps he had amnesia because American troops, National Guardsmen, were deployed against protesters and student demonstrators in this country in the 1960s, not just at Kent State and Jackson State, but in the streets of Chicago, where students and youth were bayoneted by airborne and National Guards troops, in the streets of Watts and Detroit, Harlem, countless cities throughout this country, and Newark. And I think that the thing that you're going to have to come to deal with is it's not just myself that this system is worried about. There's millions of people that are alienated and disgusted with it and are increasingly looking for a way out of this madness. And I think that you, just like them troops that they sent against the people in this country in the 60s, are going to have to confront your illusions or your mistaken ideas about the system and see what you're going to do, if you're going to side with the people or if you're going to do what your officers tell you to do.
We're discussing whether or not flag burning should be protected by the Constitution. In case you've just joined us, we're visiting with Mr. Gregory Johnson, who was the defendant in Texas versus Johnson Supreme Court flag burning case. Richmond, Virginia, go ahead.
Yeah, Joey, I know that right now while I'm talking to you, if I started swearing at you or trying to make you angry, they'd cut me off. And that's what the Supreme Court has found illegal, and that's called fighting words. And by burning a flag, that's an action which would offend a lot of people, which would be a fighting action. Yesterday I was at that rally, and I did go into the hearings, and a bunch of congressmen and protesters drenched you in effigy with fire extinguishers. And I knew that you were probably very mad about that, and what we're talking about is not mainly patriotism or enforced patriotism. A lot of people respect that, and a lot of people are going to get mad and be provoked towards violence. What you're promoting is anti-patriotism. You're promoting what you see as your revolutionary communist agenda. And, I mean, I don't know how much the Communist Party in the Soviet Union or wherever it is paying you, but that's what you're trying to force on the American people, not some sort of First Amendment rights. I'd like to comment on that.
Well, in the first place, I am no way associated with the traditional Communist Party in this country or the Soviet Union. I in no way see them revolutionary as any. I think I've stated that already before in the program. I think a lot of people are systematically miseducated in this country, and perhaps you are, because it's taken a while to make a distinction. The other thing I want to say about the flag ritual that went on outside the effigy and outside the Capitol building yesterday is that was actually insulting, or it looked really ridiculous to a lot of people who were saying these are supposed to be these esteemed statesmen, United States congressmen, who are outside the Capitol building, you know, carrying on this flag ritual. So I think it was insulting to a whole lot of people on that level, with the whole thing with the effigy and everything. But I think there is a logic to this insanity, that there's this flag worshiping that's going on, and that is that they are, as I said earlier, trying to force the flag on people. And I really think people need to see this for what it is, this thing I said earlier about it being a fascist flag amendment. And I think there needs to be a very broad offensive, and we're trying to initiate a very broad campaign that involves not just revolutionaries such as myself, but people from many diverse political perspectives. And I'd like to put out a call here to the youth that are going to be the veterans of future invasions, or the veterans of World War III. I'd like to put out a call to people who were veterans of the Vietnam era and other veterans who came to see what that flag, the ugly things that it has done in the world. I'd like to put out a call to people in the middle classes or progressive forces who may not necessarily agree with flag waving or flag burning as an appropriate form of protest, but are not willing to stand by and watch the government criminalize this.
San Diego, California, go ahead.
Yeah, I was about 10 years old during the race riots in Chicago and also during the Democratic Convention in '68. I don't remember our National Guard killing thousands of people.
I didn't say that. I said people were bayoneted. I said students were shot down at Kent State, and I don't think that was an accident. The guardsmen were there, had bayonets on their rifles and bullets in their guns, and I think it was very deliberate.
I know, but we could debate the difference between that and Tiananmen Square for hours.
Well, things are going to get worse here.
One thing I want to ask you is, it's easy for someone to take, say, let's just go to art for a second. It'd be easy for me to, if I could get my hands on a Van Gogh, to destroy it. But for me to paint something equivalent to a Van Gogh, or what other people might think is beautiful, is really difficult and really hard. And I think what you are is you're just basically pissed off at everything, and it's easier for you to destroy than for you to create.
Caller,
I want to ask you something, because is there a period in history, you spoke about the future, you're into the future, is there a period in history that maybe you see as an example of what a better future would be like?
Okay, two responses real briefly. First, I think it's ludicrous to compare burning the flag in a political demonstration to destroying the artwork of Van Gogh. There was only one original of each painting that Van Gogh did. So to destroy that would be to destroy an original piece of artwork that is irreplaceable. And I don't think that is the way to criticize art. I think the government in this country is bringing down a much greater level of censorship and intolerance of any art divergent from the norms that the government proscribes. And I'm talking about everything from what happened around the Corcoran Gallery and the Mapplethorpe exhibition to the censorship of Dred Scott Tyler, the black art student in Chicago who put the flag on the floor, to the way that they're even messing with artists like Madonna because she makes a controversial video that has interracial relationships in it. So censorship is on the rise in this country on a number of different levels. And I think that burning the flag, there's thousands and thousands of flags. Only one flag got burned at the Republican National Convention. I would like to ask, what is the government of this country so afraid of?
I believe it's a battle for the soul of America. I believe it is a battle that says that what kind of country are we going to be now? Are we going to be one that listens to Latinos, Asians, African Americans, Native Americans, gays, lesbians? Or are we going to be a country that is authoritarian, homogeneous?
We haven't killed anybody yet. He has.
Vietnam? Vietnam, you haven't killed people? Okay? Yusef Hawkins died under this country, and people were screaming, yeah, he was in the wrong neighborhood because he was black. This country is so racist with people like you who are supporting someone like David Duke.
Well, as John Lennon said, as John Lennon said, if you're going to go around waving pictures of Chairman Mao, forget about it.
John Lennon also said, let it...
Mouse the tongue on his chest right there, you know, talking about the flag. You know, when the Marines marched across Iwo Jima, the first thing they planted was a flag. The whole point I'm saying here is the flag is a special symbol for Americans. No other thing stands up like the flag. No other thing stands up like the flag. And many people are offended really bad by people burning or desecrating the flag in any way. There is a limit to free speech. And I'm telling you, burning the flag is not part of free speech. That is action, and that is not absolute.
And I think the Vietnamese who were napalmed are offended by the flag itself. I think the people in housing projects who are dumped on by this society are offended by the flag. Right. I think David Duke is offensive to me. You are offensive to me. You are supporting legislation which is trying to control people who wish to rebel against this system which is oppressing us. And on the question of veterans, one of my co-defendants, Dave Blaylock, was a Vietnam veteran who burned flags on the steps of the Capitol to defy the fascistic law, which you were upset that we overturned.
people did other things with the flag to ridicule it, to ridicule the, then it was called John Wayne patriotism. People sewed the flag on their pants, or they put peace emblems on the flag. And so the thing about it is the Supreme Court never made a ruling in the 1960s saying that you couldn't burn the flag or trying to do that. And I think it was because they were too on the defensive in the world, and it just would have more highlighted the issue, and they would have lost the allegiance of even more people.
Vehemently abhor.
I'm preparing for revolution.
You don't want the country. Who's the country? So bad, why do you pay to support it?
We want this you know what? You know how we want this country?
We support it.
We want this country under the right circumstances.
I fought for this country. My father fought. He's dying from Agent Orange because of this damn flag is killing my father.
We want it under the right circumstances.
I'm standing up for it and saying you cannot get rid of my Constitution. That's what we fought.
Get rid of your Constitution. What's the Constitution say?
The Constitution says that I can stand up and burn the flag.
It says you have a freedom of speech.
I'm going to break. I'm going to break. I'm going to break.
In Louisiana, your representatives have incited you to go and beat up, assault, and battery another person.
Let me answer that.
They have incited.
That is not true. That is not true. We filed
$25 fine.
Wait a minute. We filed that bill to send a message. That bill did not become law. We held the bill on the calendar on purpose. It did not become law because we were sending a message to the Supreme Court and the Congress to pass the Constitutional Amendment. Don't say we passed the bill like that because we did not.
Yes.
Well, I think that there's millions and millions of people, and I would like to speak to them directly for a moment, that don't share this view of the last caller of just being what I characterize as a happy slave.
Well, Rick and Cleet, it's for you guys.
Miss Brasher.
What's up, her? They will at the twilight. Let's play. That's right.
Folks, I think we can do a lot better than that ourselves. What do you say, huh?